right, welcome back to Turbo Garage. So, as you can tell, there's a Mustang missing. Mine's still here, but Jenny's is gone. I've pulled it out of the shop. I've pulled this in because I'm impatient and I want to get this engine out. So this video is going to be pulling this engine out of this thing, maybe tearing it down, but at the very least, getting the motor out. So let's just get right into it while I can. All right, so we're gonna get started on this thing. I'm gonna be working on the interior, pulling the seats out. The shifter and everything's gotta come out because you gotta get at the top of the engine. So I think the battery, all that stuff. My son Finley's gonna start draining the oil out of the transfer case, the engine oil, and also remove the drive shafts and look at getting the exhaust off. So he's gonna be working underneath. I'll be working up top, and yeah, let's get going on this thing. All right, let's see how much water. There's a little bit of water, not too bad actually. It's kind of nasty looking.
Yeah, you can tell it has water in it though. Huh?
Yeah, move it back a bit. Well, let that drain for a while and then move on to the transfer case. So next thing is to drain the transfer case. There's a small 3/8 socket, or basically square. All right, that was really tight. Well, we got her loose.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's kind of, I don't know what color it's supposed to be, but I don't think it should be milky like that.
No.
So it's probably got a bit of water in it too. Part of the reason I wanted to drain the oil out, so that's good. We'll let that drain, and then next we'll do is the transmission oil. I don't know if they share, actually it looks like they may share the same oil. There's a lot coming out of there, so I think it is actually the transmission and transfer case shares the oil. So we'll just have to see if there's another bung. If not, this will be it. So while that transmission is draining, we're going to remove the drive shaft. So there's 4 bolts connected to the front differential, 2 bolts that hold the carrier bearing here, and then 4 bolts coming out of the transfer case. So basically just stick a screwdriver in here to hold the drive shaft while you undo these bolts. So a total of, what is that, 8? It's 10 bolts in the front drive shaft will come out, and then we'll move on to the rear drive shaft. So I can't remember how these passenger seats go in, but I do know there's just obviously these 2 Phillips screws here, and then I think the back of the seat rolls forward and you get to some bolts in the back here. So with those 2 screws removed, the seat just slide it straight up, and then there's a couple of 12mm screws, one here and one there, and that'll remove the rest of the seat. For the driver's seat, there's a little lever here that you'll pull and pull the seat forward, and then you can access again the 2 bolts. I believe the driver's seat is only held on with those 2 bolts, and then the whole thing will come out. So the reason that removing the seats is necessary is to get at all the hoses and wires and everything, and to release the shifter cables, you have to remove this console. So you have to get the seats out of the way. There's a couple of push pins down here on each end in the back, and 2 Phillips screws are usually covered in muck up here. And then after that is after you get the bezel off, the boot off, if you will, then you can disconnect the shift levers, shift cables. You can undo the emergency brake cable, and then this whole plate that goes along here, it's held on with some 10mm bolts. It comes off, and then when that's off, you have complete access to the top of the motor. Okay, so now that I got the push pins out, the screws from the front of the console off, the shifter knob just unscrews, take that off, and then there's a Phillips screw in the 4-wheel drive lever. Just unscrew that, and that should pop off. With the console removed, now you can get other things like the seat belt, which has got a cable connected. You got to remove that. There's some clips here you got to remove from the shifter cables. Once the shifter cables are removed from there, there's also some, you undo these. Now this one is already missing and broken, Super common for this to be broken. There's a piece of it just fell out. I haven't even touched this. It's just like that. And the other side, I think this is the side, the driver's side most commonly breaks. The other one, I think when you remove it, it will break as well. So you can buy new ones of those. And then when those shifter cables are disconnected, then you can undo these 4 bolts and the whole shifter assembly is removed. Now, I've never worked on a 4-wheel drive one, so it looks like there's some kind of a cable here that we'll have to disconnect on this end. The wire for the e-brake comes off, and then you can remove the e-brake assembly. Yeah, we'll just start pulling all this stuff off, and then you can remove this plate. All right, so pried these things up, got them out. This one had no bushing on it, as you saw. This one on this side had no bushing. There's actually, here, I've removed the 4 bolts. Hold this on. Let's take this off here, and I'll show you. This side has a little cotter pin. I think this one may have also supposed to had, no, this one doesn't. No, just this side has got a little cotter pin, but no bushings in either one, so I'll have to get new bushings. Okay, this came out really easy. 2 bolts, hold it on, and then I just got a screwdriver and just pried that bushing right off of the stem here. So that's that. Last thing is the e-brake. All right, so to remove the e-brake, there's one wire that I've disconnected off here, obviously, a couple of bolts, and then you undo this little 10mm bolt on the end, and that'll allow you to undo the cable, and then the whole thing will come off. All right, the last thing to do here is to remove 2 screws here. There's a little little retaining plate that holds like a foam gasket on it, rubber gasket on. Then there's 4 bolts here, like I say, to remove this whole plate. But the one part that's actually really challenging is the e-brake. There's a tool that you can get that will compress all these little pins in so it slides through the hole. I don't have one, so you just basically got to kind of work it around. It's a right pain in the butt, but if you have the right tool, it actually makes it's super easy. I've got to buy one day. But anyway, so there's 4 bolts, like I say, these 2, and this thing will come out. All right, so now I got that whole engine accessible. So the next thing is to do is to start to removing all these hoses, electrical connections. And of course, what you want to do is take some pictures so you can see where things went when comes time to put it back together. Actually, before we go any further, I'm going to disconnect and remove the battery so we won't have any sparks. So the battery's out, and the next thing I'm going to do is remove this air box, because in behind the air box is the computer, and the whole wire harness to the engine will come out together. It's much easier doing it that way than trying to take it off in place. So I'll get all these hoses here out of the way and remove the wire harness for the computer. All right, with the air box removed, the next thing is to take the ECU out so we can disconnect the wires. It's held on with 2 10mm nuts. You can see the bracket right there, and then you can unplug the ECU from there, and then you can remove the whole wire harness to put it with the engine. Okay, the wire harness is removed. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the clutch cable. So the clutch cable is an access cover behind here. There we go. And then I just go in there with a little pry bar, pry the clutch back, and then you can work this cable. Actually, you might even be able to pull it through. There we go, it's disconnected. And then that will just slide out the back, and then the clutch cable's out. Also removed the throttle cable. Throttle cable is hooked up. There's a bolt on the oil pan here that has got a bracket. And you're also going to need to remove back here there's a couple of wires on the top of the transmission that need to be disconnected, because they go up here to the wire harness connected to the cab. So these have got, that's like your reverse light switch. I think it's a 4x4 switch and backup light, reverse light switch. So yeah, those got to get disconnected. So we got the exhaust unbolted. The next thing I want to do is drain the coolant. So to get to the bottom of the radiator, there's a little plastic cover here that we need to remove. So there's, I believe, 5 little screws that will hold this cover on. Then we can get access to the radiator and drain the coolant out. All right, so with that cover removed, we can get to the radiator. There you go, just leave it like that. Perfect. Don't take it right out, it's got a little drain plug, so that's good. We'll just let that sit and drain for a while. So back on top of the transmission, there's a ground wire that has to be removed. So I've got all the plugs done. One of the last things I got to do here is get this out of the way so you can see the four-wheel drive cable. That's got to slide out of this bracket. That'll be easy. And yeah, I think my son's got all the hose. The light over here. All the hoses down there are disconnected. So the coolant's drained out, the hoses are drained off. There's one line to do, a vacuum line for your brake booster. And I think that's about it. This thing is ready to come out. All right, one of the last things I gotta do here is pull this rear drive shaft out. Now, my son did pull all the bolts out of it, and for whatever reason, like any other drive shaft I've done before, you undo that, you slide it forward a little bit into the yoke, and then drop that down, and then it just slides right out. For whatever reason, it's like this drive shaft is too long. I cannot get this slid back at all. It's like tight. So I've come to the conclusion what we're gonna do on the other side, we're just gonna pull the bolt out of the front leaf spring and actually just slide the axle backwards on the right side of the vehicle there and just give enough clearance so we can drop that drive shaft down. I have tried everything. So if there's a trick to get that drive shaft out that I don't know about, please put it in the comments down below, because this has been driving me nuts. So I got the drive shaft out, and the only way I could do it was to remove this bolt, undo the clamps holding the emergency brake, and kick the tire forward so that the whole rear differential would slide back enough that it would come out. If you want to slide that out of the drive, oh, hang on, let's get an oil drip pan. Okay, slide that out. Yeah, no oil. There you go. So I do not know why that drive shaft was such a challenge. There must be some kind of a trick. I'm gonna look into it. Okay, so we got the exhaust off. You can see remnants of water. This thing was water started pouring out of it, rusty water. So let's we'll have to check inside there and see what the inside of that manifold looks like. But right now what we're doing is just cracking these. These engines are held on with 3 points of contact. So there's a bolt here, one on the other side, and one up here on the top of the transmission. There's another bracket. And what I found is if you just do these, the engine will not clear this bracket. You need to come down. So you need to actually remove this whole bracket. I found that out the hard way last time I did this. So you want to do is just remove these 3 bolts and take the whole bracket with you all at once. So we're just loosening the bolts off. We're not removing all of them.
Probably loose enough.
Yeah, just get them loose, and then because we're gonna probably finish this up tomorrow. But also there's a ground wire right here. You want to make sure that ground wire is off. Got the starter out, but just go around and make sure you get all. There's no more ground wires or straps. There's also some wires up here. Move the light. On the back of the transmission, there's a couple of connectors here that we had to disconnect. But with that done, I do believe that is it. It is ready to come off. It's only held on with the 3 points here and drop the whole thing down. So we're pretty close. Okay, so this is gonna come out now. First thing I'm gonna do is remove that bolt there on the aft motor mount, which is on top of the transfer case. That is 14 millimeter, and then we're gonna lower the whole thing down onto a block of wood here, and then remove the forward 2 mounts and drop the rest of the motor right onto the ground, onto the floor, and then lift the back of the transmission transfer case up and pull the block out and lower it onto the floor. That should be pretty straightforward, so let's just get this done. All right, so there you go. We got the engine out, sitting on the ground. Now I think what we're gonna have to do is actually jack the truck up a little higher so we can slide it out from under the truck. So there you go, motor's out on the ground, out from underneath. So start to finish, that was about 2 hours and 45 minutes with the two of us doing it, and my son taking some direction and setting up the camera, stuff like that. So really, in all honesty, 2 hours to get one of these out is more than enough time. A couple hours, pretty easy to do. So what we're gonna do now is disconnect the transmission from the engine and start disassembling the engine, get the wire harness off, stuff like that. So we'll start with the transmission. All right, so the wire harness is off, pulled the hoses off, pulled the transmission off, and one motor mount. We'll get the other motor mount, but what I want to do now is actually get the truck out of the garage, it's back on the ground, and get my table set up so I can dismantle this engine on my my stainless little pan, so I don't get oil everywhere. So we're gonna move a bunch of vehicles around, get stuff out of the way, get this up on the table, and we'll start dismantling it. Okay, so we got the engine up on the table here, so the next thing to do is tear this down and find out actually what the damage is inside. But you're gonna have to wait for the next video because I'm gonna call this for this video. That's enough, we got the engine out. And the next thing, as I say, is to tear it down. So yeah, think about subscribing so you'll know when the next video comes out. And yeah, thoughts and comments down below. I'm really curious to see what this is gonna look like inside. Maybe give your thoughts, what you think the damage is. I think it's a couple of bent rods, one for sure. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching and have yourself a great day.